Can we start the live stream and then I'll go into the introduction? Ready? Lovely. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Policy and Resources for the 29th of June 2021. First item on the agenda, emergency evacuation procedure. Everybody is a regular here, so I won't go through that. Apologies for absence. Have we got any?
We have, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Keel and Councillor Delaney, with Councillor Bailey substituting. Thank you.
Yes, I understand Councillor Delaney is a much more important function than anything that Ryedale can throw up, i.e. one football match. Declarations of interest. No, apologies, we've done that. Declarations of interest. Anybody got any interest to declare? Is this microphone echoing? Is the whole room echoing, or is it just my hearing particularly sensitive? It's me. Okay, that'll do. Chair's announcements. I've only got one, and that's in relation to the car park action plan. I don't think this committee ever saw that. I think it just saw the strategy. But we need to look at the action plan and how we will deal with it. There is no action car park working party, and therefore my suggestion is, and I've already contacted group leaders and suggested to them, the date I suggested was the Monday of 1 week, and that was helpful to two members who are on, I think, either Norton or Malton Town Council, and therefore the suggestion is that we move it to the 22nd, but that's just, there should be an email on its way or already with group leaders now to answer that. That takes us on to item 5, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of May. Kane.
Sorry, I know it's your announcement section, Mr. Chairman. I just can't think of a better place on the agenda to raise it, but obviously we've been notified as group leaders today about the joint works group and what the Chief Executive has decided to accept as a way forward. And I was just wondering if you could, presumably you're aware of this, if you could update committee about the decision that has been accepted by the Chief Executive, given that it's very different to what full council recommended for her to do.
I couldn't possibly comment, but I think from your question and my tone and your expression and my expression, I think it's clear to say that there are a few differences there. I think it ought to be. I was wondering about putting it on as an urgent item for tonight, but I have no evidence that everybody's had a chance to go through it all, and I think it needs some discussion. So my proposal is that we put it on to the group leaders meeting for the 22nd to consider it at that point. I realise they've asked for us to come back to them ASAP, but if we're not meeting till the 22nd, then ASAP will be the 23rd of July as far as I'm concerned. How do you feel about that?
Happy to discuss it at that point. Obviously, there is a request as well for us to let Haroon know the two member representatives, but I'm not sure as group leaders that we're necessarily in a position to do that.
I'm suggesting that we can reply at that.
Okay.
And I'm using reply in its broadest possible sense, which I suspect you take the whole of my meaning with that, in relation to the motion that was passed at full council and the email that we've received this afternoon.
Okay, I'm happy with that. I just don't want us to miss an opportunity to make appointments if it has to be done formally through committee or through
It
council,
may well have to be, and I think we've got another P&R on the 29th. And is that correct, Tom? Yes. We have a P&R on the 29th, and I'm sure with your usual objections to urgent items that it could become an urgent item on that at that meeting if we have to do it formally. But that gives us a week from a group leaders meeting to sorting something out that everybody's happy with, and if not sorting it out, then yes, it needs to come to P&R. Thank you for raising that.
Chairman.
Yes, please.
First of all, I have had a chance to read the email. I'm extremely disappointed. When I had my interview, I was led to believe that something much more aligned to what was discussed and passed by councillors was going to be put forward. However,
Can I cut into you there? I think you're saying similar thoughts, and I'm reading Keane's mind and myself. I'm saying let's give it a thorough discussion.
Yes, I want to carry on if you don't mind.
Well, I really don't want it as an item on the agenda. I really don't want it as an item on the agenda tonight because it's
I'm
not.
going to say anything else about that.
Ah, okay. Well, that's fair enough. And I'm not cutting you off.
Yeah, don't cut me off. Thank you. I have said what I need to say about that particular item. I can't make the 22nd. I've got a hospital appointment that I cannot. So you guys carry on without me.
Can we all at the end then? This is a wonderful item. It's sort of moving along onto a different subject.
But you guys carry on without me.
Can we suggest have a very quick chat in the car park when this is finished tonight?
That's fine.
To see if there is a date that will suit all of us, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's somebody missing. Who's the sixth one? Di, yes. Let's see if we can.
That could be a good way forward, but
let's see if we
as
can
I
get
say,
that, yeah.
if you wanted to carry on, I just wanted you to know my feelings.
I would try to get. Try to get all 6 there if I can.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to raise anything on any other business that I've let loose at the beginning of this? No? Fine. Item 5, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th. Can I move that as a true record?
Go on, I'll do it for you.
Would it be so kind as to second that? Yes.
Put my mic on.
I know
I'll
you're not
second it.
used to seconding, but fine. Any corrections to it, Lindsay?
Just that, Chairman, I think I did actually give my apologies, but I think they're missed off. Thank you very much.
That I didn't spot or know.
Thank you. Are they?
I'm looking in the direction
Are
of
they on?
administration.
Because
Thank you. Any other alterations other than that? It's moved and seconded. Are we voting electronically or by the usual system of waving hands? By a show of hands. Those in favour of adopting the minutes as they are, with that correction? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you.
That's 8 votes for and 1 abstention. So that's
8
fine.
votes for and 1 abstention. Urgent business. Councillor Keane will be delighted to know that I have no urgent business. I did consider bringing the item that he raised under Chair's announcements as an item of urgent business and decided not to, but as he raised it earlier, that'll do nicely for me. Policy and Resources Committee forward plan. Is the item, Councillor Duncan, that you asked to go on there on it now? Remember at the last meeting you asked for an item to go onto the forward plan?
There was a few, wasn't there? I think I
Yeah,
mentioned
no, you
one or
had
two.
one that I didn't know about.
Yeah. I can't remember what it was, but there is others that perhaps aren't on there that maybe should be. Motions from council that haven't yet been dealt with. I think the OMB one and the flooding one. I know we've now got the flood.
But there was one that
working
you
for that.
raised. All those others I have on my list.
Budget.
It was to do with the COVID budget, but because you asked me, did you know what it was? And I said, not in any detail. And
Yeah,
we
it's-
agreed to ask, well, we agreed for it to go, we didn't know when, but we agreed for it to go on the forward plan. Is it on there now from what you can see?
Well, the revenue and budget monitoring is on there from Q1, but I don't think that's the relevant item. And the treasury management's not relevant. I think it's a separate thing, which is a
Yeah.
request for extra budget.
Yes?
And I can't see it on there. It may be covered in something else, but I can't see it.
So, I'm not going to move anything now. I'm going to ask the officers if they can check that the items that were there are now on the forward plan, with particular reference to the one that Councillor Duncan raised. There were others which I've said it doesn't matter when you do it, and I'm comfortable it does need to be on there.
We can pick that up as an action after the meeting. The Section 151 officer is on the virtual part of the meeting, so I don't know if he's got any comment.
Well,
because
there
it
was
was
several.
a
There's the local,
budget-related
there was the
item.
local plan, etc. There's several items. Can we just make sure that the action that they are all on that?
Yes, we can follow that up
Lovely.
afterwards, Chair.
Thanks. And nice to see Anton, who wasn't visible to me prior to... Oh, he's waving as well, yes. Good. Unfortunately, Anton, we have no treasury management on the agenda tonight, and you know how much I enjoy that. Right, is there anything else on the forward plan? Councillor Duncan?
Sorry, this is going quite far in advance, but the 3rd of February 2022.
Are you still on? You're still on the forward plan, or are you on the consultation?
Sorry, no, I'm on the forward plan. Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
The meeting scheduled for the 3rd of February, it lists council plan refresh as being an item. And this is just really a question in terms of things that should be coming, I think, appropriately to committee every single time, which is we approved that council plan almost unanimously. I think, John, you didn't support it in your group, but everybody else did.
Sorry about that.
And obviously the idea with that is that we would monitor delivery of that
Yeah.
plan. And the aim, as has always happened, is that there would be updates, reports on delivery of that plan, I think, to ONS and to PNR. And while, obviously, with COVID situation, I think it was fair enough to give some leeway in terms of getting that reporting process in place. However, it seems to me it must have approved that over a year ago now, and I've seen no monitoring updates on delivery whatsoever. It was referred to, and it seems a bit of a nonsense perhaps that we're going to refresh that plan in February of 2022 when we haven't had any updates on delivery so far. And I note that we did approve additional budget to the performance and strategy department, which I thought would be one of their key roles and responsibilities, would be monitoring the council plan delivery. That has not happened, and I've seen no sign of that happening, so maybe something you could take up, Chairman, to see what's going on with that, with a view to that being reported into every PNR meeting going forward from this point.
And I would add, there's another one to add to that. I don't think climate change comes up until March next year, and that is supposed to report to policy every 6 months. And when we get to March next year, I'll have been in this chair, provided I don't resign or get removed or whatever else happens to chairs of P&R, I will have been in post 10 months at that point, which doesn't quite strikes me that over a 10-month period, the top of our priorities, urgent, should appear a little earlier than that. Can I suggest that we note the, I propose that we note the forward plan, but call upon the chair to have discussions with the necessary officers to look at some of the, to examine some of the timing. Will that wording sound?
Yes, that wording's fine to be included in the minutes, just in terms of a couple of the specific questions. There is a climate change update down for September in the forward plan.
Ah.
I'm also advised that
If it is, then I've missed it, and thank you.
the financial update that
Yes, it
Councillor-
is. Yes, it is. Withdraw that previous comment.
the financial update that Councillor Duncan had requested at the last meeting, I understand, is coming as part of a larger financial report to the July meeting of P&R as well.
Just I hadn't been informed. So if it is, I'll withdraw that proposal, and I'll check down the list with the officers as such. But unfortunately, nobody's come to me and said, in relation to what you decided at P&R, we have done this. I'm picking it up the same as you are there. And that's probably not quite the best way to have had it handled. Because you've missed one, I've missed one, and we're both raising ones that might be there. So it needs some tidying up, does that? Right, so we'll note the forward plan then, I think will be what we'll do for the minutes. Everybody, can I take that without a vote? Yeah, everybody's nodding at that. Good. Government consultations, item 8. I have got one that's brought to my attention, and that's Transport for the North. And I've received this today. It's taken 2 or 3 days in this council only, but it's taken a week, 10 days before that to get here. And it's got to go back by the 16th of July. So I'd like to thank Philip for bringing this speedily through this process here to here. We now know that it's what it is. Transport for the North is something that is vital to us all, because the one thing you can't do is live in Ryedale without sensible transport, even though most of us do. And on that basis, I'd like to thank Philip in the meeting for bringing it quickly to us, but we'll have to do the consultation the same way. In other words, circulate it to members of P&R and ask for comments for me to go through before the 16th. That is vastly better than what we had a couple of months ago, but still probably not quite to where we need to get. We ought to have been having it out with the minutes of this meeting, and therefore we could have discussed it tonight as a consultation as to what we wanted to submit. But I'm very pleased that it's here at all, which is a vast improvement. And as I said, the delay in this building's been a couple of days, full stop. Not long enough for us to have had it for this meeting. So thank you, Philip, very much. That's much appreciated. Has anybody else got anything that they know of in consultations that the government is throwing around and we ought to be considering? No? Claire, yes, please. Sorry? Now no, deadly serious. That is important. Oh. Yeah. Sorry, can I propose you switch the tape off for a minute and let's have a minute before it gets too random for the public to listen to. Tell us when. Hang on, Claire. Tell us when. Are we off? Can I suggest? Are we switched? Is the tape switched off? Hang on, tell us when we're live. We're live, thank you. Sorry to the public for having an adjournment in the meeting, but I think waiting for a 2-0 win over Germany was well worth adjourning the meeting for 5 minutes for. We'd finished consultations, item 9, appointment of the Flood Management Working Party. Is that, as it stands, the nominees and the places as everybody thinks that it should be and is? Everybody happy with what we've got there? On that basis, can I propose it en bloc rather than reading each one out for each one? I propose that. Have I got a seconder?
I'll second it.
Oh, that's very nice, very nice of you, Councillor Arnold. Lovely. Those in favour, unless anybody wishes to comment? No, those in favour. Unimouse, lovely. Thank you. Now, we've got a date for that, haven't we, Simon?
I think it's next Thursday, Chair.
I'm just checking. Flood Management Working Party, Thursday the 8th. I think it's only fair that although the chair of P&R should be the chair of all working parties and subcommittees, I will try and attend the flood one because flooding is important to Ryedale, but I don't think I've got the time to chair it. So on that basis, if anybody who is on there wishes to consider the chairs between now and then, I am not on it, and therefore I won't be chairing it ex officio or any other way. I will be turning up to some of the meetings, not voting and taking part on occasions, but I won't be chairing it. So on that basis, the membership will have to decide their own chairs. And I think there's nothing we have to do tonight in terms of reference or whatever else. The one question mark that I have heard is that people are wondering whether we have enough co-options, because I think the standing orders or the terms of reference say up to a third, and by definition that would be 2. Now, if North Yorkshire, the Internal Drainage Board and the Environment Agency all would like to be co-opted, hello, we've got 3 people that maybe would like to be co-opted and ought to be, and only 2 places. But I'll leave that to the Flood Working Party to discuss and think, and then come back to us and ask us to change those terms of reference if they so wish. That's the only thinking and input that I've had on that subject. Has anybody else got anything else, or shall we let them get on? Claire?
Yeah, obviously when we discussed this last time, I said I wanted to see that there was, you know, there was a representative from the villages
Yes.
that were affected that could be co-opted onto this.
Yes.
Is that still?
No, we agreed that.
Yeah. So.
However, we've now mentioned 3 bodies that have been involved. Yours is a 4th one, if there's another one from over and above that. And we've got 2 places.
Right.
So I'm saying something needs to get changed with that, but let the working party meet and come back to us. I like your villages thing because it's all Norton.
Absolutely, and that's the
without
problem.
being rude to Norton. I've just been rude to Norton, sorry. But that needs sorting out, and enough spaces for the others need if the Flood Working Party would like to do it. And I'm saying let's see what they come back with. We can decide, we're the decision-making body, but your point, we'll have to go in abeyance until they've met and sorted out what they're going to do with co-options.
Right. Okay.
Because they haven't enough spaces for the number of people that
So right.
I think they would need.
Then why didn't we create a committee that would have enough?
Because we didn't spot it at the time. You didn't spot it, I didn't spot it, we haven't done
Right.
it, we've spotted it since.
Right. Okay. All right.
Jim?
Is it not within our gift to alter those terms of reference now, so that they can co-opt for, say?
I think we could, but you should have things that you're going to decide on the agenda beforehand. And if they say next week, we would like you to co-opt, then that can go as a formal change onto the agenda at the next meeting. We could do it tonight, but I don't think that's the way to do it.
It just seems to be short-circuiting, having to go round again if they have
Well,
that
it's
option.
right round and back round the other side is 4 weeks full stop, and I can't see the flooding working party being stopped from doing something by having somebody there that is not co-opted with a vote but just invited in. They have to write to these bodies to find out if they would like to have somebody co-opted. And as far as I'm concerned, we would, and Claire's concerned, we would want extra people on there, so we're not going to say no to increasing that number, I wouldn't have thought.
But surely if this committee decide that they don't want to do that, then we could
Well,
be in a position
we
where
could make them do it or not, but I've just thought that let the committee's the one that's doing the decision and the groundwork, let them decide.
Right, okay, all right.
You know, if, dear in Yorkshire Water, if we have the power convicted, would you be prepared to send somebody along? If they come back and say, no, that's a place we don't need. If they come back and say, yes, please, we would like somebody to go on there, then we create spaces as necessary. I don't know, we'll see. Did I see another hand?
I was just going to say, just thinking of 2 examples in the past where we've had people come in from external organisations or external representatives. The Milton Room's been one, where we had people from various different organisations and bodies come to speak to us and put input in, and the car parking working party where we had county councillors make representations. They were never actually formally co-opted at any point, but they were in attendance, could speak,
Yeah.
could
Yes.
interact and give their views and feed into the work. So there may well be advantages to formally co-opting, but I assume that even those people who are co-opted, would they be voting members or is it the councillors? Because obviously that could take things in a different direction than perhaps elected councillors want to take it in, depending on the co-option. So my personal view would be that the working party invites who it wants to invite, makes representation, speaks, takes part as the chair of that meeting's happy to see happen. But we don't get too het up necessarily on formally co-opting people, and that would mean that you can have whoever you want at whatever meetings going forward. And perhaps the answer actually is just to remove the co-option line when we discuss it next time. That might work, I don't know.
I've got very similar views to that, and I think you may end up with where we started, whether we co-opt and we then call it 2 councillors or 2 members of the public or whatever, and that Yorkshire Water are regular attendees, the Drainage Board are regular attendees or consultees and don't get co-opted but play an active part, and there isn't votes. I've attended and so has John, outside of this meeting, observing us as it were, attended oodles of those meetings, and I can't remember a single vote on anything ever. So whether they're consultees saying what they believe or co-optees saying what they believe becomes pretty irrelevant. So I think they have a discussion, see what they want to do, and then if changes need to be made, we can do it. And if changes don't need to be made, we don't need to. And, you know, I believe in delegation as much as possible. If they're happy with what they're doing, let them get on with it. Anybody else got anything on that? Is there anything else we need to cover on that you know of, Sam? No. We now come to the highlight of the evening, the draft revenue outturn. Anton.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, firstly?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. So this is as you say, John, it's the draft outline position for the last financial year. And it's draft simply because it's part of the draft accounts, which will go on to the external auditors very soon for them to start their annual process. But I have to say that we're not expecting any major changes to these figures. So I'm just going to go through briefly the main points of the report. And apologies if sounds like I'm losing my voice. I am, but it's nothing to do with COVID because I've had a test. So in terms of the key points, really, it's fair to say it's been a pretty unusual year, or it was a pretty unusual year in terms of budget and in terms of trying to constantly predict how much extra we were going to spend on COVID and what that would mean for the overall position. In terms of the money going through our accounts, through our books, turnover was, and you can see this in Appendix A, turnover was around £3.5 million higher than we'd budgeted for, both income and expenditure roughly. And that was a direct result of COVID, including business grants, for example, going through. The overall draft position is showing a deficit at the year end of £345,000. That's a bit better than we'd been predicting at Q3, and I'll come back to the reasons for that. That's also after using the £250,000 of reserves that the council agreed way back in March 2020. Overall, in terms of COVID costs, you can see in the report that there's been additional gross COVID costs of £1.6 million, and that's detailed there and shows what we spent it on. Income of 1.2 million from government has largely offset that, and that's a better position than we probably predicted 6 or 8 months ago. But it's better because we've continued to lobby central government to get some recompense for those costs. So once you take into account the 250,000, then there is a net COVID cost in these accounts of 135,000, and therefore a further non-COVID cost, if you like, of about 210,000. The main area of overspend, that 210,000, has been in employee costs, and particularly in legal services and additional monitoring officer costs over 2021. In terms of the COVID costs, the biggest significant items are loss of car park income. So these are costs, but they're also loss of income. Car park income, 380,000, and then there's also an additional 238,000 of staffing COVID costs. We did predict a higher overspend at Q3 of just over £800,000. The reduction since then is two things. Firstly, additional grant income that we've received from government of around about 160,000, I think, from memory. But also our actual costs haven't been quite as high as we were predicting back in December. And we've tried to contain those as much as they can. In terms of the capital, it shows significant slippage of about £2.3 million, mainly due to projects being delayed. Most of the funding for those projects is required in future years, and to continue to fund the programmes agreed by Council in February. So most of that £2.3 million we're requesting to carry forward to fund those projects. The final point to make is around reserves. So reserves look like they've reduced by a very small amount, by about 19,000 to just over 16 million. But I do caution in the report that we've already committed quite a bit of that in terms of costs that are delayed from the last financial year. And also, you'll recall that we did use some reserves to balance the budget back in February. And then if we carry out all the capital projects that we agreed back in February, we will use, as I say, well, over £10 million of that. Final point, really, and this picks up the earlier discussion about that report that Councillor Duncan mentioned at the last meeting. It does actually say, I think, in my report, so I'm just looking at it, 5.11, which bizarrely follows 5.14. It's the last paragraph anyway of section 5, where it talks about the reserves, and it does refer that I will bring back a bigger kind of report on a number of things, including reserves. So that's a brief summary. Happy to take any questions. Also happy to answer any questions on some of the detail. I probably won't have all of the details to hand tonight, but I can always follow those up individually. But the overall report is showing a deficit of 345,000 on the revenue account, slippage on capital, and requesting to carry forward just under 2.3 million of the capital funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. Anybody got any questions for Anton? Jim?
Thank you, Jack. It was just a question about those things which are rolling forward. How sure are you that they will happen like you thought they would do when they were planned to happen last year? So.
I think, if I'm honest with you, I think it's mixed on some of those. So we have, if you look at the capital appendix, you will see where those underspends are. We have already started spending the money on the vehicle replacement programme, for example. We have started spending money on the housing programme. And there are other bits where we are still going to look at business cases, for example. So if you look down near in the second bottom part of that, we're looking at the Milton rooms, which will come to members very soon in terms of the additional 307,000. We've got money in there for the livestock market, etc. So it's a bit of a mixture, really. I'm confident we'll spend more than we spent last year, but we'll keep you updated through the regular quarterly monitoring as much as we can on that.
You happy with that, Jim? Anything to follow up with?
Well, no, it's just that it needs watching, doesn't it?
Anybody else with any questions? I've won, Anton, while the rest of the committee is coming up with something else. It says Council approves a cash forward of 2.264 million from the capital programme, but a couple of pages further on it gives the capital programme as, I've lost it, a slightly different figure, 2.312. Should those two numbers be the same, or am I missing something? Well, no, I'm missing something. It's a question of telling me what I'm missing.
No, it's okay that they're not the same. So that 2.312 million is the kind of net variance, and there were actually some items of the capital programme where we spent more last year than we budgeted for. Therefore, they've lost that money from next year, so they don't get to use it again, if you like, because they've already used it. And there are some programs that we set aside, didn't spend the money, and are not intending to carry that into next year. It's not very many of those. But the short answer is it's okay that they're different.
They come off the 2.312 to turn it into the 2.264.
That's correct, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Anybody else for any more? Jane?
Just one thing, Anton, which is in relation to the salary and employee costs. Obviously, that is our biggest source of expenditure. There has been an overspend in that area, additional. And I was just wondering if, looking ahead at the current situation, whether there is actions that are in place to address that overspend in that area for the next financial year.
Yes, there are. so part of it, the bulk of it is to do with COVID, and then we have agreed, at least at this stage, 6 months of additional budget for some of those COVID staffing costs, and that will come back to the committee for any further consideration next month. On the non-COVID costs, it's primarily down to legal services, where we did spend additional due to additional demand. Part of that was it was down to additional demand, and it was also part of purchasing additional agency cover when we couldn't source our own employees, or in fact North Yorkshire couldn't source employees for us. That's now sorted, and we now have a full complement of staff, albeit we have one legal member who's on maternity leave. But that aside, yes, the short answer rather than the long answer is yes, we are doing something about it. What we're trying to ascertain, Keane, is how much of a continuing overspend there will be into this year, if there is one, and we'll bring back that part of the Q1 report.
Thanks, Anton. Any more for any more? No, I think that brings us to an end on that of the questions. We now need to move to the recommendations. Under 2.1 on page 15, it is recommended that the Council notes the contents of the report and that the draft deficit balance of 345k has been transferred from the General Reserve. The Council approves a carry forward of 2.264 from the capital programme. And I'm a little bewildered, and I'm going to ask Simon to explain. If this is a recommendation to full Council and not a decision, why is it not a Part B item? Because we aren't deciding anything, all we're doing is recommending to full Council. Or is that an Anton question? It's a somebody question that I don't know the answer to.
I think Anton will be able to assist with it, Chair.
Yeah, it's because, and I dug it out because when I read it again, I thought it does look a bit odd. But in our financial procedure rules, as part of the Constitution, the very first one says, the Policy and Resources Committee shall be responsible for regulating and controlling the finances of the Council and related activities within a strategy determined by the Council. So that's why this comes here, just for that decision.
So, if we're controlling the finances of the Council, why are we asking Council to approve a carry forward and not doing a carry forward?
No, I don't think you are. I think Policy and Resources is acting under delegation as part of the Council. Hence, it's the Council, but it happens to be this committee who is the Council, if that makes sense. Simon will tell me off if I'm talking rubbish. But that's my understanding.
I wouldn't like to be watching you two playing ping pong. I'm going to leave it, but I really don't consider that we are what is known in this building as the Council. I believe that we are the Policy and Resources Committee, and that the meeting that meets all the way round this meeting in nice hostile form is the Council, and we make recommendations to the Council under Part B items. And this is us making recommendations to the Council, but it's a Part A item. I think, well, I'm very grateful that we've beaten Germany 2-0, because if we hadn't, this would be the final illogical straw on top of it. So on that basis, I will move that. Do I have a seconder? I have got Councillor Arnold seconding it. Is there anybody else wants to have any debate on it, or should we go straight to the vote? Yes, please, Ken.
Just one thing that I wanted to highlight within the report, which again returning to the salary and employee costs. Obviously, there was that additional expenditure of 376,000 over and above the budget. But you will also note in there, and I think it's worth members noting this, that the budget itself was just over £1 million more set before COVID than the year previous, which would be 1920. Obviously, as you can see now, the actual spend is 9.1 million in last year, 2021. That is, I would imagine, an unprecedented increase in the amount of staffing expenditure, staffing costs, and obviously the additional costs which were agreed, including that £238,000 for the additional COVID spend, again takes us to an expenditure in terms of salary and employee costs, which I imagine we hadn't seen in this council for many, many years since it's been at that level. So I think it's just worth noting that and pointing that out, because that is obviously quite a big area of expenditure, and we need to ensure as a council that we have the right people in the right places doing the right things so that we can deliver the priorities of the council, because there does seem to me to be a large amount of we can't do that because we don't have capacity. We can't do that unless we spend more. We have spent more. We spent significantly more. In fact, we've probably spent more than we ever have in staffing, in real purposes, in terms of staffing, in relative terms, perhaps for many years as well. So I think it's just worth making that point, that we approve salary costs and expenditure so that we can deliver our priorities. And there does seem to me, personally from my perspective and others that I speak to, a great frustration that the priorities of the council don't seem at this point in time to be acted upon, not least delivered. And that is becoming extremely frustrating.
I think this is the third time that I found myself in agreement with you tonight. There's a clear increase in staffing costs over the last 12 months. And there was a clear feeling in the building that we have not got enough resources to deliver. Now, I don't know enough about, but my feeling is that maybe some of the resources are not in the right places. Now, that's not a criticism, it's just a feeling. But there must be something happening. If you can say what you've said now, and I'm getting the same impression, it is certainly something that we ought to consider looking into. And I think that might be an item that we put on this already rapidly filling up group leaders meeting to look at what we could do, should do, or whatever in relation to it. Because my concerns and your concerns may be completely unfounded, but I think they need to be removed if they're wrong, or answered if they're wrong, because it seems strange that two people who come at things from quite different angles usually have got similar impressions. Now that could mean we're both wrong. That's well possible. However, we need to look into it so that it can ensure that we're not both wrong in our feelings, logic, whatever it is. Has anybody got any comments to add to that? And I thank you, Keane, for raising that. Have you any comment to make, Anton, or does it sound a little political and therefore keep hidden behind Hadrian's Wall may be a good move?
No, I mean, Councillor Duncan's correct. The staffing costs have gone up. They were budgeted to go up by about £1 million, and on top of that, there's been an overspend. So that's fact. But I'm sure we'll be happy to provide details of where they are.
staffing list up to date would be quite a good start to that. Councillor Duncan.
A staffing list, I don't know what you mean by staffing list, but an FTE number would be good. I think both me and you, John, are quite surprised recently at the number of staff that we now have, the actual total figure, but an understanding of the FTE and also staff structure charts would also be extremely useful.
That's the one I meant, King.
Yeah. I have requested these before, I have seen these before, however, there's probably been quite significant changes since that point, and I have a feeling that we perhaps don't have those charts as up to date as they should be, and maybe that's something which we should formally request as a committee that we'd like to see.
I think that for now we are on something slightly stronger than a feeling. I have asked for a staff structure chart, and it's nowhere near enough to give us the answers to the sort of questions that we are asking. So if you've had one before, whether it was adequate or not at that point, I'm sorry, but it appears not to be at the moment. Now, it may be between editions, as it were, but it is something that we definitely need before we can start looking at, and because there's no point in taking Anton giving us the details in numbers unless we know where those numbers apply. I think we've said enough on this, and I think we've people who will be listening to this will have heard enough to realise how we feel about it. Jim, I take it you're not just waving good night.
I understand your point. It is, in my view, for the paid service to deal with those structures in certainly the first instance, and our recompense should be the performance indicators and what the council is delivering. That, to me, is the measure of the efficiency of the staff, not poring over the structures as elected councillors. But certainly, I understand what you're saying. You know, if more investment in staff is going on, performance indicators should be improving.
I think that's absolutely right, Jim, but I will sort of drop two thoughts in front of you. When we started to set up and ask for a cattle market working party, there wasn't enough resource to deliver it. And my understanding now is that we need more resource to deliver the local plan. And at that point, if you're told we can't, or we may not be, or it may be delayed, the delivering of your performance indicator, then is the time to ask why. Now, the why might have perfectly reasonable and logical answers to it, but you can't wait until the car's gone off the road to then test the brakes. And if there's something wrong, you need to know as soon as you can, because it's absolutely no point in saying, well, the performance indicators said we wouldn't get this done, and we wouldn't get this done, and we didn't get this done, and we didn't get that done, and oh, by the way, it's now too late. So there is a line. You are absolutely right. The head of paid service is responsible for the employment in the building. But if we're asked to put more money into staffing, and then the results may or may not be following where we want them, there's several possibilities, but we need to know the answers to what is happening. That, I think, is all what Keane and I are saying. Is that what you're saying, Keane?
I think that's a fair summary.
Yeah.
I'll go with that.
This is frightening. I think we pack up with three agreements and a 2-0 victory. I think we'll go home at that point. Any more? I have moved the recommendations on page 15, 2.11 and little 2. Anybody any more before I take the vote? No. Those in favour? No, I think we've lost a vote over there. Those against? Abstentions? That's unanimous without doing any further checking. Right, thank you, Anton. Unless you have a vast need to sit and watch the rest of the meeting on waste consultation, we will not be upset if you've gone home or moved to another part of home at this point. You're waving goodbye. Fine. Thank you. Take care, and thanks again. Can I have suggest you switch off for 2 minutes while we sort that out? Start the live stream again. You wave at me when we're there. Lovely, thank you. We now move on to item 11, Resources and Waste Strategy, DEFRA consultation on collections. Becky Bennett. See her turquoise little badge.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Chair, if I'm here, please could I just refer back to the item on the good management, the options around the motion?
Didn't hear that, Becky.
Can you hear me okay?
No.
Yeah.
Can you refer back to?
The item on the good management working party and the options for the motion that was sent out with a briefing paper to the committee, please.
Options on the motion.
On flooding.
Are you saying we should have done something tonight?
Yes, Chair. It was just around the motion from full council to policy and resources regarding whether the motion is referred to the working party or an interim officer report is submitted to the policy and resources committee in July.
You are absolutely right, Becky. I'll go with that. There was a motion to full council on flooding and flood pumping, etc. in Norton. And the suggestion was that that should be referred to the flood working party. I don't think we've got it on here, but that's my fault because I had been told about it. So can we go back to item 9 and put in that we refer the motion on flooding from Councillor Keel and Councillor Mason re-flooding in Norton and refer it to the refer it to the Flood Management Working Party to look at and report back to P&R. I don't think that's controversial. In fact, it's so non-controversial it went past me. Do I have a seconder, or are you... No, that was, a hand went down very quickly. Right, do I have a seconder that goes to the working party? Joy, thank you. Right, anybody got any objections to that suggestion? Jane?
Sorry, it's just a question, which is that do we know the views of Councillor Keel and Councillor Mason?
Well, their views are presumably fairly close to what the motion says.
So, I mean, in terms of what happens with the motion, I mean, are they happy with it going to the Flood Management Working Party?
Yes, sorry, yes they are. And I can't remember, I'm just looking to see, but at least one of them must be on there. Yes, Councillor Keel is on there to receive her own motion coming to the working party she's on. So you can't do better than that than have a voice. And then when it comes back from the working party to here, she's here to wave hello to it at that point. I don't think there's a problem there at all. Kane?
I mean, the only thing that I would raise is that the motion itself states that it calls on the council to enter into immediate talks. And obviously, this was submitted in the 18th of February. And I know things now seem to be taking a very long time to do anything in this council. However, it's now June. It goes to the working party, which is next month. The working party makes recommendations to the next meeting of P&R. P&R then refers things to council. That doesn't sound very immediate. And I don't know, maybe I'm just making a point that things do seem to go very slowly. And it just feels again that if this isn't the right course of action, then perhaps it should be dealt with. If it is the right course of action, then council should agree to it. But maybe the right place is for the working party to look at it. But it just seems again that something's not quite happened in a speedy fashion.
Oh, this is better, Councillor Duncan. We've had one or two very speedy things this year that have gone to full council, and they've been handled so speedily that full council has dealt with them straight away. And as a result, we have had car parks that should have been closed or should have been free or should have been charged for, and round in circles at a speed that I had to overstep my mark and not install charging or non-charging, I can't remember which way around it was, for a week before P&R then met a week, 10 days later. And on that basis, yes, this is slow, and I'm not following it, and it's not my motion, but it has taken some time. But then has the Works Council, which has another long fancy name, taken a long time. And that fits in with the outturn of resources, I suspect. I don't know, but I suspect it does. That quite a few things are going slowly. I talked to Di this morning, and she was quite happy with that. I think the enter into urgent talks is a bit of a how shall I put it? It's very difficult to enter into urgent talks for any organisation before you know where that organisation itself stands, before you start entering into negotiations, discussions, whatever, with another body. I don't think this is exactly slowing it down, because the Flood Working Party is next week. We have another P&R within a month, or bang on a month, and that's unusual in itself. If it was normally P&R in a couple of months' time, then yes. But it'll be back to P&R, or not back to P&R, depending what they do with it, because they shouldn't be limited to having one meeting in that month. They can have two, you would hope, a small group like that, and come back and say, we can't, we need, whatever else. and then there will be need for an officer's report with it or not. I am personally nervous of it because I don't want this council to be bailing out Yorkshire Water, because my concern in there, and it's a personal view, and when we get to the debate we'll either agree or disagree around the room, but I actually think that debris in the gardens in Norton is not debris, it's sewage. And sewage is the responsibility of Yorkshire Water. Now, that is a big issue and a big debate, but not something that the council should be coughing up too much money for in a hurry. Now, I'm not saying we don't work as a good partner, I'm comfortable with that, but there's a big difference between working as a partner and carrying the can for something that somebody else should be doing. And without being rude, and we are disagreeing to a tiny extent for the first time tonight, I'm saying I think this is too big an issue, and I disagree with the urgent talks with our partners. I think we need to know exactly where we are and what the facts are on the whole lot before we go too far, and then we can have slow or urgent talks when we know where we are and what the facts are. And I hope we're a little nearer together, having said that, than we might have felt we were at the beginning of it. Any more? That was a question, and I've given you a very long answer, but I think it's too important to give a brief John Clark one-word answer and then look at you. Right. Any more for any more on that? Anybody want to speak on referring it to the Flood Working Party, or are we all happy with that? If we're all happy with it, I won't take a vote. I'll agree it by affirmation. Anybody want to speak against it? No, in which case, can it go by general affirmation, please?
Yeah, it's recorded, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you, Becky. My stupidity.
No, thank you, Chair.
You're not supposed to agree with that quite as quick as that.
I did put my hand up, but Anton started talking about the finances, which why did it before I started to talk about the consultation.
Right. Right. Consultation.
Okay, thank you. So members will be aware this is the fourth and final consultation on the government's proposed changes to national waste policy set out in the resources and waste strategy, and the draft response to the consultation is attached to Appendix A. Just to briefly say that the answers that are being given are based on the impacts to Ryedale District Council's current waste and recycling collection services, and it's really important to stress that the responses reflect agreement with the principles of increasing recycling. However, it's very complex and the timescales are very tight, and a phased approach based on having infrastructure in place and clarity around impacts and funding is fundamental. And Table 6.7 sets out all the proposed changes, which all start from the financial year 23-24. The expected timescale in terms of knowing when the outcome from the consultations has been suggested as either being later this year or early 2022. And there are two key updates just to alert members to regarding the draft response, to highlight around the food waste collections, which I refer to question 14. The County Council as Waste Disposal Authority have indicated that they would need until 2030-31 to implement changes at Alton Park to handle food waste collections. And the second change or amendment to the responses at the end, where a range of questions centre around waste franchising and zoning. And the view now is that we would prefer a combination of options, and consultation with businesses would be required to inform any changes. they are the two amendments to the draft document. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the team for the hard work in the pressures that all the 4 consultations have placed on us with the time turnaround for the responses. And a reminder that there's still time to feedback any comments to myself by midday on Thursday to ensure that I have time to consult with the chair on the final submission, which is due on the 4th of July. I'm happy, of course, to take any questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Have we any questions to Becky on it? Keane?
Just one question, Becky, please, which is relating to the garden waste collections. Obviously, it states very clearly in that RDC does not support the introduction of free fortnightly garden waste service. It cites, obviously, that residents can make a choice whether they pay to receive the service or not, and that a free service would mean citizens without gardens paying for the service through taxation that they otherwise would not be receiving. I just was wondering why that is so clear, that position that RDC does not support that free fortnightly garden waste service, given that I think the evidence from elsewhere is that it would drive up that recycling of green waste if there was a free universal service available to all.
Reason that, we're saying we offer the service to all residents. We did expect the drop in
Breaking up, I think.
collected, and when we introduced the charging, we could see the drop that we'd expected.
Can we all, no, I don't think, Becky, we're not hearing properly.
Sorry about that. I'll try again. Is that any better? I don't know if it's my connection.
That's clear now, but keep going.
Okay. Yeah, the reason that we're saying that is because when we did offer the service to all residents prior to charging, we did expect, when we introduced charging, that the recycling rate would reduce significantly, and we didn't see that when we've ended up with just short of 50% of residents subscribing to the service. We only saw a drop of 30%. So that's one of the reasons for saying we disagree with it, because the actual performance didn't decrease in line with the expectation when less people were actually subscribing to the service. But you're right, if we didn't charge, then everybody would pay.
Just a supplementary on that. Obviously, within the question, unless I've misunderstood this, Becky, it states very clearly that the free fortnightly service will be fully funded by government. Now, obviously, there is only taxpayer money, and taxpayer money, whether it's local or whether it's national, is still taxpayer money. However, it wouldn't be Ryedale District Council money. So I was just slightly amiss as to why we would disagree with a free fortnightly garden waste collection, particularly if this was going to be paid for by government, irrespective of whether relatively it's been a slight reduction in terms of the amount of money that, the amount of green waste that's being collected. So if we can get any increase and we don't have to pay for that, then we surely should be supporting a free fortnightly service, with then councils, ourselves including, having the ability to charge for more frequent collections if they want to, and or additional capacity. It just seems to me, I don't quite understand why we would object or disagree to a free fortnightly garden waste collection service if there is unlikely to be an additional cost to us.
The government are very clear on this in terms of the funding. They will fund additional costs, but they will not fund loss of income.
And if I could, Chairman,
Yes, please do.
just one further point, which is And you stumbled across it there, Becky, that actually the reality of the situation is, as far as I understand it, that while the report presents it as residents who don't have a garden paying for a service, which if it was universal, they'd be paying for that service, the reality of the fact is that people with gardens are not just paying for the cost of green waste collections, they're paying over and above the cost of delivering that service. There is a surplus, and therefore people who have gardens in the Ryedale district are actually paying an additional amount of money, a stealth tax, to subsidise other services, not just green waste. And I think we've stumbled across the issue there, which is we're objecting to something for the reason that it's going to cost us money because we're charging those people more than the cost of the service to deliver. And I think that is actually quite scandalous, to be honest with you, and I don't think serves the public as a whole, given that most people do have gardens. Those people who do, not just paying for the service, the cost of that service, they're paying over and above that for other services too.
I would need to double check this, Councillor Keith, but I'm not aware that we actually operate the service as a surplus. But I would need to double check that if I come back on that outside the meeting.
Okay.
Can I just put a balancing point in here, and I don't think it's fair on Becky, it's somewhat political. Some of us argued, and it may have been wrongly, long and hard against charging for the collection of garden waste. In the same way as some ones argue strongly against having public schools and so on. There's a whole range of things that we think should come out of taxation that everybody should pay for. I've moved on from there, and I've now got a question mark, which makes life a little bit more difficult than when you know clearly where you're going. I don't know how good it is for the environment of collecting garden waste at all is. Because it's taking very low 4 miles to the gallon diesel vehicles and a great chunk of steel that is slowly deteriorating round that takes coal to produce it and having a massive impact. And it may be better if we reduce the amount of green waste that's collecting and give people composting tubs, etc., rather than at a discount or whatever else, for all those that need and want. Now, because I don't know how good for the environment collecting green waste like that is compared with composting it at home, not even being fancy with your composting, just leaving a heap in the garden. So the only people that would then need it is people with small gardens that have got a small amount of green waste that they can't lose, in inverted commas, in their garden. I don't know. But we need the numbers on that in climate change terms, because if it is good for the environment, I can go with the government support for it. I am nervous because prior to not everybody in this room, but to some people in this room's period on this council, we had free swimming came over the horizon. And the government said, we need to get obesity down and we will pay for free swimming for everybody. And we had people flocking in to take up free swimming. And they came in from Scarborough and wherever else because Ryedale took the government's money to do free swimming. Our name was mud when the government stopped funding the free swimming. So there is a danger with this one, that we buy more wagons so as to do whatever. The government doesn't pay all of it. And then 3 years down the track, the government said, oh dear, no, austerity, you'll have to start charging for it. So all the hiccup that we had of charging people, we've then got to charge again, or not collect, or have vehicles. So I think there's a lot of pitfalls in this, whichever way we go. That isn't a question to Becky, that's a whole string of questions that we will need to decide on which way we're going. Claire?
I just think that if we, you can't force people to have composts, and you can't have,
No,
you know,
no, I didn't say
I
force.
think my concern would be if we don't offer this service and people don't have that ability, we will end up with more fly tipping, we'll end up with people, you know, they won't want it. I think it's something that as a council, you know, it might not be ideal having a wagon going picking up at 4 miles to the gallon or whatever, but I think it's an essential service, and I think it's something that we as a council have to offer. And I would really fight very hard that we collect the green waste. Not everybody wants a compost. Not everybody wants a compost heap in the garden.
I'm talking purely in environmental terms, because we have a policy of reducing greenhouse gases, and this may well increase greenhouse gases. Because if you have somewhere at the wilds of Rosedale who says, I'm not paying 30 whatever pounds a year, and they compost it themselves, that is wonderful for the council, because it saves a vehicle having to go 4 miles, 2 miles there and 2 miles back, to collect it. And all I'm saying is there may be ways. I'm not in favour of not collecting at all. I'm just saying there may be things that are better in environmental terms than collecting at all. Or, in environmental terms, it may be best to get every pound of green waste in that we can. I don't know the calculation, and I suspect there's nobody in this room knows the calculation. We need that looked at and calculated, and there may be a route through that isn't absolutely collect everything, or the other extreme, and I accept it's extreme and it's not something I'm in favour of collect none of it. That's produced a whole sea of hands. Jim, can you remind me, Keane, because you're stuck behind this.
And the points you made are correct, but if it's a national scheme, then they're national issues that you're talking about, as opposed to just for Ryedale. And so, of course, those things should be thought about, but if there was a national fortnightly free or fortnightly nationally paid for waste collection service for green waste offered to Ryedale, I wouldn't want to be the one that's saying we shouldn't have it when others do. So my instinct is that we should, if that's going to happen, we should be part of it. And we should be part of the wider conversation about the issues of collecting green waste.
Yes.
But
yes.
I wouldn't want us to lose out by saying we don't want it.
I'm not suggesting we do.
So my instinct is that this is wrong, and we shouldn't be saying we don't want it.
I'm suggesting the government may not be paying for it, i.e. buying the wagon and doing it. They may say, how much will it cost you if you spend the wagon over 10 years? How much will the tenth of that be that we will pay you in the first year? And I'm just saying there's a danger there. It happened with council tax discount. We'll give you this massive council discount. Then they cut it down. Then they only not allowed us to increase council tax, and an awful lot of councils ended up with needing to increase their council tax, and they weren't getting the subsidy from the government, and they couldn't do it anymore. I'm just saying there's a note of caution there. Joy?
A lot of the answers, in summing up, you say that Ryedale District Council is the Waste Collection Authority and North Yorkshire County Council are the Waste Disposal Authority. So, and it comes down to expense and probably North Yorkshire getting their finger out and doing something that a lot of other councils seem to be doing throughout the country. Is the sort of the expense and the fact that North Yorkshire aren't giving you the capacity to do this, the two main barriers?
Becky?
No, it's about what we've currently got and what we would need. And so as the disposal authority of the county council, if they needed to put in place new infrastructure, for example, they would then claim the additional costs as a disposal authority. So the questions are being answered from a collection authority point of view rather than a disposal authority point of view. It's not that the county council aren't working on looking at options to support collection authorities, but it's difficult for us to answer some of the questions because it's not what we do. We do the collection rather than disposal. So, for example, at the moment, we don't have the infrastructure to deal with taking out the the food waste, the food waste collections, the infrastructure at Alton Park wouldn't cope with what it would bring from all the collection authorities in North Yorkshire. The county council looking at options for how they would change that current disposal facility to facilitate that. So it's not a barrier, it's just that all these things need to be considered in the round so we could all actually implement the change and be able to operate and dispose of the waste appropriately.
So what you're saying is if North Yorkshire could accommodate that, we could deliver that as a collection authority at minimal expense, or would there be a great cost to this council? My concern is that there's a lot of people get in touch with me. They're still not sure that it's just on the collection of the metal containers and plastics mainly. They still think that they can put anything in the thing, and it is only bottles. And so when they find that out, they get quite frustrated that we're not delivering a service that's obviously plastic's very much on the scene at the moment on the TV about how we're dealing with it, and yeah, we'd all like to do it from the manufacturers producing less of it, but we are where we are at the moment. So I just wondered if there was anything we can do on plastics that doesn't involve too much expense, or if it does, maybe that we can actually, because it's what the taxpayer wants, if you like.
Yeah, it's a really valid point you're raising, actually, Councillor, because this isn't North Yorkshire County Council in terms of the recycling. This is what we do before it gets to any waste disposal site. So, for example, adding the extra materials into our curbside recycling, like the aluminium foil and food trays, that would then need to go on to the processing, which we deal with outside of the disposal authority already. At the moment we take all our recycling materials to Kirby Misperton, and then that material then goes to onward recycling facilities. The problem we've got with these materials is those facilities, the infrastructure isn't there, or what is there would involve transporting materials further, and there'd be a cost associated with sorting the materials, and then furthermore the end market for actually the demand for these materials. So it's all very complex, and yes, the answer to the question as a resident, and I would say it myself, and as officers we felt with doing the consultation, we would like to say yes, it'd be lovely to recycle all those materials, and the answer still is yes, but there does need to be the infrastructure investment in place to enable us to do it, and that's the problem. And that isn't a North Yorkshire County Council problem as disposal authority. That is just a problem for us in this area in terms of how we then recycle those materials.
Keen?
Yeah, just two more additional questions, if that's okay. Very briefly on the same topic, but to different people. Anton, if he's still on the call. I don't know if he's gone, has he?
No, I gave Anton the go home ticket on the.
Oh, right, okay, apologies.
Sorry about that. Well,
no, that's fine. Just returning to the issue of the green waste collections again, the question then to you, John, really is, I know you mentioned there about reasons why the principle of green waste collection might not be a good idea in environmental terms, and I can completely understand that and accept it, and we can have that debate and look into it. But the issue here is around whether that service should be provided for free, funded by government. And I suppose my question to you is whether, and my memory, my recollection is that there is a significant amount of money surplus every year for delivery of the green waste service. That is the reason why, in the past 2 years, as leader of the council, the budget reflected a freeze in green waste collection last year and the year before, because the amount of money raised was above the cost of delivering the service. So my question to you, John, is irrespective of whether it's right to do green waste collections, we already do it. It's happening now. The issue is, should we be saying as a council, do you think it's right for us to be saying as a council to government that we don't agree with providing that service for free if it's funded by the government? That's my question to you. If you think it's political, I'll ask you as a politician your views on it.
I don't know. because I go back to the carbon calculation. The financial calculation depends on the small print, and this is a consultation, not a government statement. If the government comes over the horizon and says this is what we're doing nationally for the good of climate change, and these are the carbon figures, and therefore it makes sense, and we are going to give you the capital sums to buy the equipment, in other words, make the cost genuinely naught, yeah, I can go along with that. If, on the other hand, and I can't think of a single government thing that's been like that, we will refund all your expenses for COVID. Really? I haven't seen it yet. And that's not this government, that's government of every colour or whatever, because by definition, governments sat in Westminster are not in Malton, Pickering, Norton, let alone the villagers, for knowing what it is like at the grassroots. So on that basis, I would love to give you a blank cheque and say yes or no on that. I don't know at this point. I am wary of things that look too good to be true. And I have the background statement in relation to taxation that the people of Ryedale are national taxpayers, the same as the people in Surrey are national taxpayers. So it's all very well saying, oh yes, we'll do this and you won't have to pay your 40 quid. But by the way, income tax, VAT, whatever other tax it is, goes up to pay for that nationally. And until we get proposals rather than consultations, I don't know exactly where I am on that. I like that. You ask a question, I give you a supplementary saying I don't know, and you say there's a supplementary to it. Keep going.
Irrespective of whether the government are paying for it or not, I suppose the question I'm trying to get at, irrespective of the government consultation, is whether you think it's right that we should be charging people who do have a garden who want this service more for the service than it costs to deliver it.
You've heard the answer to that from Becky. Becky said she doesn't know.